I remember how nice you were, and how pleasant, how tender, how comforting, how sexual, this, that, and the other. I remember that. And I said, oh, darling, I love you. Is that love? And is pleasure to be denied? You must ask all these questions I'm asking. You understand? You must ask, find out. Doesn't it give you a pleasure to look at the waters of a stream? What's wrong with that pleasure? Doesn't it give you pleasure to look at a solitary tree in a field? Doesn't it give you pleasure to see the moon over the mountains as last night you saw it, perhaps some of it? Great delight, wasn't there? What's wrong with it? But then the trouble begins when thought says, ah, how beautiful it is, I must keep it, I must remember it, I must worship it, I hope to have more of it. Then the whole movement of pleasure comes into operation. And that pleasure we call love.
Well, now really, when we go back then to falling in love and say it's crazy, falling, you see, we don't say rising into love. There is in it the idea of the fall. And it goes back, as a matter of fact, to extremely fundamental things. That there is always a curious tie at some point between the fall and the creation. Taking this ghastly risk is the condition of there being life. You see, for all, life is an act of faith and an act of gamble. The moment you take a step, you do so on an act of faith because you don't really know that the floor is not going to give under your feet. The moment you take a journey, what an act of faith. The moment you enter into any kind of human undertaking in relationship, what an act of faith. You've given yourself up. But this is the most powerful thing that can be done. Surrender. See? And love is an act of surrender to another person. Total abandonment. I give myself to you. Take me. Do anything you like with me. See?
So Khalil Gibran said about J. Krishnamurti, when I walked into the room, J.K. was sitting and Khalil Gibran went to meet him. He said, when I walked into the room, I walked into a wall of love. It just hit me in the face. See, you would never associate J.K. with love. He's not a loving man. That's not how he looks. He's like this. He definitely doesn't look loving, but he's very loving. His energies are absolutely compassionate, but his words are like knife. So, people felt something, but they couldn't figure what it is. They couldn't get a hold on it because he wouldn't give a hold. He said, if you hold it, you may get stuck with this, so don't hold. If there were millions of razor-sharp minds in the world, that would have been a fabulous way to do things. But in today's world, in the existing way the humanity is, the way people's intellects are entangled in a million things, that method is just not going to get anybody anywhere. It's a beautiful process, but
So we are asking, what is love? And we said we've got so many opinions about it. Opinions of specialists, opinions of gurus, opinions of priests. Your wife says or your girl says, this is love, or you say, this is love. Or you say it is related to sex, and so on, so on, so on. Is it? Is it related to senses? From the senses arises desire. Have you followed this? Desire is the movement, the concentrated movement of desire. The movement of the senses is desire. Obviously, so don't look puzzled. I see a beautiful thing, which is the senses awaken, and I want it. Oh, come on. Look at it for yourself. You see, we are saying when there is the movement of the total senses, the whole senses, not a particular sense, then desire is non-existent. You think it out. So, is love the movement of the senses with its desire? Right? Is love, to put it differently, desire? Sexually, senses are in operation. The remembrance, the pictures, the images, the sensations, all the time. And that movement of all that is considered love. Love, as far as one can observe, is part of desire. Go slowly. We haven't enlarged it. Don't look puzzled or say, no, that can't be. We're going into it. Is love attachment? Understand? I am attached to my girl or boy. I possess. So is attachment love? And our whole life is based on attachment. Attachment to property, attachment to a person, attachment to a belief, to a dogma, to Christ, to whatever it is, attached. Is that love? When you are attached, in that attachment there is pain, there is fear, there is jealousy, anxiety. You may lose. So we're asking, where there is attachment, is there love? When you observe it and you are concerned deeply most profoundly to find out what love is, then attachment becomes unimportant. It has no value. Because that's not love. So, it's not desire, it's not remembrance, it's not attachment. Right? It's not I'm telling you and you accept it, it is so. And is love pleasure? Don't look so depressed. I'm sorry. It doesn't mean you can't hold the hand of another. But we'll find out. If you understand this, we say desire, the outcome of sensation, sensation attached to thought, thought attached to sensation, and from that sensation desire, and that desire wants to fulfill, and we call that love. Is that love? Is attachment love? In attachment there is conflict, there is uncertainty. And therefore, the more there is uncertainty, more the fear of loneliness, the more you become attached, possessive, dominating, asserting, demanding, and hence conflict in relationship. And this conflict is part, you think, is of love. And we are asking, is that love? And is pleasure love? Pleasure is the movement of a remembrance. Right? Don't memorize this phrase, but just listen to it. I remember how nice you were, and how pleasant, how tender, how comforting, how sexual, this, that, and the other. I remember that. And I said, oh, darling, I love you. Is that love? And is pleasure to be denied? You must ask all these questions I'm asking. You understand? You must ask, find out. Doesn't it give you a pleasure to look at the waters of a stream? What's wrong with that pleasure? Doesn't it give you pleasure to look at a solitary tree in a field? Doesn't it give you pleasure to see the moon over the mountains as last night you saw it, perhaps some of it? Great delight, wasn't there? What's wrong with it? But then the trouble begins when thought says, ah, how beautiful it is, I must keep it, I must remember it, I must worship it, I hope to have more of it. Then the whole movement of pleasure comes into operation. And that pleasure we call love. the child, with the baby with the mother. And she says, I'm full of that tender affection, feeling of holding. Is that love? Please don't jump on me, just I'm asking. Or that love is part of your heredity. Sorry. Haven't seen the monkeys holding their babies? The elephant caring for the little one infinitely. That maybe we have inherited this instinctual response to a baby. And that is my baby. No, no, don't shake your head. It's my baby. It's of my blood, my bone, my flesh. I love it. And if you do love your baby so greatly, you will see he's properly educated. You will see that he's never violent, he's never killed or kills another. But you don't care. You only care for that little baby till he's about 4, 5, 6, and then throw him to the wolves. Right? So, is all this love? Now, the positive action is to say, no, I will no longer have sex, I will no longer, I will do this, I will get rid of attachment, I will be free of attachment, I will work on attachment. Do something about it all the time. Whereas the negative action is to see it in its entirety. Therefore, have an insight into it. Then you will see that love is not any of these things. But because there is love, from that love, all relationship changes. You know, the ascetics, the monks, the sannyasis in India and Europe and all monks all over the world, they have said, no desire, no sex. Don't look at a beautiful woman. If you do, think of her as your sister or your mother. Or, if you do look, concentrate on the divine. You follow? All the rest of that. And they are burning inside. Outside, denying, but inwardly burning. And that's what they call religious life. Which means they have no love. They have an idea of what love is. The idea is not love. The idea, the word is not love. But only when you have seen the whole movement of desire, attachment, pleasure, then out of that depth of perception comes this strange flower with its extraordinary perfume. That is love.
And so if you do, in the first place, feel selfish and come to the conclusion, as a result of trying various experiments with love, that you love yourself more than anybody else, the proper thing to do is to investigate your self-love, to find out why you love yourself and what you mean by yourself when you say you love yourself. For the reason is this: love is not something that is a sort of rare commodity. Everybody has it. Existence is love. But it's like water flowing through a hose. It depends in which direction you point it. So everybody has the force running. And maybe the way in which you find the force of love operating in you is that you have a passionate like of booze, or ice cream, or automobiles, or good-looking members of the opposite sex, or even the same sex. But there is love operating. And people, of course, tend to distinguish between the various kinds of love. There are good kinds, such as divine charity, and allegedly bad kinds, such as, in quotes, animal lust. But it should be understood, I think, that they are all forms of the same thing. But they differ in rather the same way that the colors of light, of white light, divide into the spectrum when passed through a prism. So we might say that the red end of the spectrum of love is Dr. Freud's libido. And the violet end of the spectrum of love is agape, the what is called divine love or divine charity. And that in the middle, the various yellows, blues and greens are friendship, human endearment, consideration, and all that sort of fellow feeling. But it's all the same thing. And so the thing is, first of all, to get it moving, to follow whatever kind of love you have in the first place. Because you cannot control love until you have some to control, until you have it running. You've got to get your car running before you can learn how to drive it. You will not become a skillful driver by sitting at a still car in a garage any more than you will become a skilled dancer if you simply never move your arms and legs. And so the first thing then is to discover what indeed you do love, if anything. And you will find there is something. And then go into the nature of that. Now it's said that selfish people love themselves. I would say that that is really a misunderstanding of the whole thing, because yourself is something that is really impossible to love. There are various reasons for this, but one obvious reason is that loving oneself is as difficult as kissing your own lips. Oneself, when you try to focus on it, to love it or to know it, is oddly elusive. It always slips away like the pursued tail of a dog who is trying to get hold of his own tail. So to pursue your own end has some difficulties about it. If you explore what you love when you say you love yourself, you will make the startling discovery that everything you love is something which you thought was other than yourself. Even if it be very ordinary things such as ice cream or booze, in the conventional sense, booze is not you, nor is ice cream. It turns into you in a manner of speaking when you consume it. But then you don't have it anymore. And so you look around for more in order to love it once again. But so long as you love it, you see, it's never you. When you love people, even however selfishly you love them, because of the pleasant sensations they give to you, still, it is somebody else that you love. And as you inquire into this, as you follow honestly your own selfishness, many interesting transformations begin to come about in you. One of the most interesting transformations of being directly and honestly selfish, in the same way that, for example, cats are, is that you stop deceiving people. A great deal of damage is done in practical human relations by saying that you love people, when what you mean is that you ought to, and you don't really. You give the wrong impression, and people begin to expect things of you which you're never going to come through with. We have been taught, for example, that we ought to love our enemies. Now, we don't really understand what it means to love our enemies. We think it means to be charitable towards them in the hope that we will convert them, and so that they will cease to be our enemies. The real reason for loving enemies is that one needs enemies. They're terribly important to you. For example, I think that some of you here feel that you belong to a nice set of people. It may be an ordinary kind of bourgeois coterie of pleasant squares, or it may be a church group of some kind, a club, or a special cult, or just a group of friendly drinkers. But at any rate, you feel that by virtue of membership in this society, you belong to a special in-group of nice or saved people. Now, when you consider what nice people talk about when they sit round the dinner table and have an opportunity to nurture their collective ego, you will find that the most fascinating topic of conversation is the nasty people. How awful they are, what dreadful things they do, and what is it all coming to. And this very, very satisfactory, condemnatory conversation nurtures your ego. But people who do that don't seem to realize that they thereby depend on the nasty people in order to know that they're nice. They are, as a matter of fact, highly indebted to them. On the other side of the picture, the nasty people, they, on their side, consider that they really are the best people, and nurture their collective ego by blasting the bourgeoisie, the squares, the wasps, the know-nothings, or whoever they may be. And so, for the collective ego of the non-squares, the squares are extremely necessary. If they were to disappear tomorrow, many of us would lose a cause. Now, the minute you begin to become aware of this, it's rather embarrassing. It's, of course, humorous, and I'm glad that you see this. Because at once you begin to realize how much you depend on an enemy, or an outsider, or a group of damned people as distinct from your own group of saved people. And so you begin to realize that if your collective ego, or yourself, depends on your being on the in, but you can only be on the in with relation to something that is out. And since the in and the out are inseparable, if there is to be any in or any out, you suddenly discover that yourself is bigger than you thought it was. It includes the other, and you can't do without it. This brings about a fundamental change in the understanding of the meaning and nature of self. And thereupon, there become a change of attitude to other people, even if you continue with some formal opposition to them and disapproval of them. When, then, you are honestly clear with yourself what you like and what you dislike, and then, at the same time, yourself begins more and more to include things that were hitherto defined as being not yourself, your love, which is what you are, begins to express itself quite naturally and unaffectedly in a wider way. Now, to trust oneself to be capable of love, to bring up love, in other words, to function in a sociable way and in a creative way, is to take a risk. It's a gamble. Because you may not come through with it. And in the same way, when you fall in love with somebody else, or you form an association with somebody else, and you trust them, they may, as a matter of fact, not fulfill your expectations. But that risk has to be taken. The alternative to taking that risk is much worse than trusting and being deceived. In other words, to live together, you have to take risks. There will be disappointments and failures and disasters as a result of taking these risks, but in the long run it will work out. My point is that if you don't take them, the results will be so much worse than any kind of wild anarchy that could be conceived. You see, here we are now as a highly disciplined human race, with all kinds of rules and religions, and what are we about to do? Blow ourselves completely to pieces. Was this all a good gamble? Because you see, in tying up love in knots and becoming incapable of it, you can't destroy this energy. You turn it, when you won't love and you won't let it out, the thing comes out in the form of self-destruction. The alternative to self-love, in other words, is self-destruction. Because you won't take the risk of loving yourself properly, you will be compelled instead to destroy yourself. So, which would you rather have? Would you rather have a human race which isn't always very well controlled, and sometimes runs amok a little bit, but on the whole continues to exist, with a good deal of honesty and delight when delight is available? Or would you rather have the whole human race blown to pieces and cleaned off the planet, reducing the whole thing to a nice scoured rock with no dirty disease on it called life? But I repeat the point that is necessary to understand this whole thing, that love is a spectrum. There is not, as it were, nice love and nasty love, spiritual love and material love, mature affection on the one hand and infatuation on the other. These are all forms of the same energy. And you have to take it and let it grow where you find it. If you find that only one of these forms exists in you, if at least you will water it, the rest of the plant will blossom as well. But the essential prerequisite from the beginning is to let it have its way.
Sadhguruji, you just mentioned love, and today it is about life and love, and I would like to know, for us it is maybe love your family members, whoever it could be. Why I ask you this is because there's so many versions of this, and I really want to get to it. Some teachers, some gurus, some guides will say, you know, you can love, but you must be detached. Oh. You must love, but it cannot be conditional. It should be unconditional. And so there's versions of it. I just want to know.
See,
so
the simple way of make you keep coming back to me is to give you something that you cannot do. To give you a teaching which you can never do. You must love, but you must be detached. Now you have to keep coming back to me for consultation, endlessly.
Sorry.
I'm saying throw yourself into your love affair and die into it. Something will happen. Something worthwhile will happen if you're willing to die into the process. Not just anything, whether it's your work or your life or your love or whatever, if you do not know how to throw your entire self into it, you will never know the taste of what it is. Love but be detached. Why do you want to love then? Only because you want to include somebody as a part of your life, part of yourself. That's why you love. No, I love but I am detached. This means you have to come back to consultation every day. It's like a psychiatrist's job. Every day you have to come and sit on the couch. You need treatment and there is a fee.
So, okay, all right. So you can love and be attached.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, I'm coming back for consultation, please. So what did you say?
I only said, see, what is this need for love in a human being? You must understand, a human being constantly, a human being is longing to be something more than what they are right now. If this finds a simple, basic physical expression, we call this sexuality. Sexuality means just this, physically you're trying to make something which is not you a part of yourself. For a few moments you may succeed. If you try this mentally, it gets labeled as greed, conquest, or maybe simply shopping. Some people go for conquest with swords and guns, some people go with checkbooks and cash, credit cards. The thing is, you want to include something which is not a part of you as yourself, that is the whole effort. Whether you want money or wealth or you want to occupy a nation, what is it? Something that is not you, you want to make it yours. Yours is an effort to make it a part of yourself. If it happens emotionally, on the emotional level, if you try this, we call this a love affair. You're trying to make somebody who is not a part of you, a part of yourself emotionally. This is a love affair. If you do it consciously, we call this yoga. Yoga means union. So all these efforts are fine, everything has its own beauty but has its own limitations. When you understand the limitations of all the other methods, nothing right or wrong about it, it is just that it will work briefly, it will not work for always. When you realize that, you consciously try to include. When you consciously become an inclusive process, if you sit here, if you experience everything as yourself, then we say you're a yogi, okay? So this is a love affair successful.
You said love, inclusiveness. I can't understand how I can love everybody in this room.
You cannot. There's some people you cannot love.
I can barely see up there and up there. So how is that? How do you include everybody in your love?
See, because you are looking at love as something that comes to you or you yield to the process of love only because you appreciate a particular quality, a shape of somebody's nose or the shape of their mind or their thought or their emotion or the way they speak or the way they do things or the way they relate to you, something, okay? There are many things. It is based on something that is acceptable to you. If they do something that is not acceptable to you, love crumbles.
Yes.
Now what I'm saying is, I want you to look at this, whether love happens to you or hate happens to you, anger happens to you, misery happens to you, joy happens to you, it only happens within you, isn't it?
Yes.
It never… People say love is in the air. No. Because you are feeling very pleasant in your emotions, suddenly air feels vibrant. It always been, you missed it all your life, now you're beginning to feel it.
Okay.
All right? So, whatever human experience, love or hate, whatever, happens only within you. What I'm saying is, at least what happens within you must happen by your choice. Consciously you must be able to make it happen. If you are able to… if your experience of what is happening within you is happening by choice, what is the problem? It only happens within you. Love is not a relationship. A relationship is a different thing. Love is a certain sweetness of your emotion. Whether you look at a tree or a dog or a man or a woman or a child or just at the sky, why can't you look at it lovingly? Because it's not about loving the sky, it's about the sweetness of your emotion. If your emotions are sweet, whatever you look at it in a certain way. Right now you have nasty emotions, whatever you look at it in a different way. So you have always associated love with somebody. No, this is not about somebody. Love is not something that you do, It is something that you can become. If you're willing, you can become love, you can make your emotion into a very sweet space. If you make your body very pleasant, it becomes pleasure. If you sit here, it can be great pleasure, just sitting here and breathing. This is what we're teaching people. If you sit, I will show you millions of people, if they close their eyes, tears of ecstasy will just drip. Nothing, simply close your eyes. Ecstatic they are, bursting every cell in their body. Because body has become so pleasant. If your mind becomes pleasant, we say this is joy. If your emotions become pleasant, we say this is love. If your very life energies become pleasant, we say this is blissfulness, this is ecstasy. If your surroundings become pleasant, we call that success. Now you're calling your success with somebody as love. That's a mistake. You have a success story with somebody, that is, you have created pleasantness in the atmosphere between you and let's say 5–10 people around you. You're calling that love. No, that is actually success, because that needs lots of management.
Yes, it does.
Yes or no?
Yes, it does.
Yes, but for you to be loving, there is no management. If you just make your emotions sweet, your emotions are sweet and it's beautiful to be like this. It's not about anybody. If somebody comes, we can share it. If nobody comes, you can sit here with your eyes closed and still be loving. What's the problem? It is not about somebody, it's not an action. It is not something that you do, it is something that you can become.
It's a lovely, idyllic.
It is not idyllic, it's the way it is.
I mean, you'd really have to practice this.
Why?
Because I'm
See,
thinking…
this is what exactly I'm saying. If it is an action comes to perfection with practice. Only if it's an action. I'm saying love is not an act. Is health an act? Are you acting healthy right now?
No.
I know you're an actor, but are you acting healthy?
No.
So health is, because
Yes.
we have done certain things and health is, isn't it?
Oh, we've not done certain things,
we have
we've been
definite-
given
No,
health.
no, no, no. Oh, we've been given, but if you eat bad, if you live bad, you won't be healthy. We've done certain things to manage our health. Similarly, if you do certain things, you can manage the pleasantness of your mind. If you do certain other things, you can manage the pleasantness of your emotion. If you do certain other things, you can manage the pleasantness of your very life energies. This is things that you can do. Now, what you can do internally, you're trying to manage externally. What can be done here within you, you're trying to manage by creating an atmosphere around you, which is a very difficult thing to do, because outside will never happen 100% the way you want it. To some extent we can manage. We can't do all of it by ourselves because there are many forces involved.